Welcome to today's episode where I'm going to be talking to the author of 60 is a Good Start. Joining me today is Alison McCune Davis, and I'm really excited about this interview. I was just saying to Alison before this that I've watched a little bit of your YouTube and, followed that, and you're just so relatable. And I think I'm hoping that's going to come across today for my listeners as well. But Alison, 60 is a good start. There's two meanings to this, right?
Yes.
Tell me a little more.
Well, the first meaning is 60 years old, or we could translate that to 40, 50 to 70, 80. I mean, really, but I was 60 when I kind of freaked out and then wrote the book. But at that, when I first turned 60, I was just like, oh my goodness, 60, I'm 10 years from 70, 20 years from 80. What am I doing with my life? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Just really in that prior year leading up to it, I was really introspective and kind of similar to when I turned 40 and 50. But I was busy those decade birthdays. The first one, I was pregnant with my second. Turning 50, I was adopting our fifth from Ethiopia. So I was busy, inundated with children. We have 5. But then 60, right? So several have moved out of the house, college, work. I do have a couple left. My 18-year-old just graduated high school, and then I have a 15-year-old. But they're very independent, right? So everything is different now. And I was restless, and I understand that 60 is a real transformational time for women. Like they've been, raising all their kids, for 20 or 30 years, or in a big career for that long, or both. And, maybe they're sick of what they were doing in the career, or just, it's just a time, I think, that we really reevaluate. Now that time can be earlier or later, but it's somewhere in there. So anyway, that's one meaning of the book. The second meaning is 60 days. So this book is all about natural health and longevity. And I can tell you about sort of the studies I looked at in a bit, but it's about little habits, changing our habits, and for the purpose of longevity, right? Living a long, healthy life. And it takes at least 60 days to form a new habit. That is a thought habit, a physical habit. It's any kind of habit. It could be longer. It could be up to 8 months. This is according to Dr. Caroline Leaf. Do you know who she is?
Yes, that's a big name.
She's amazing. And once you start listening to her, you love her. She's written tons of books, and so she has looked at this habit growth on the nerve cells in the brain and can see it grow into long-term habits that just become automatized, right? So it takes at least 60 days for that. People have said 21 days, 30 days. No, it's at least 60. So that's why 60 is a good start, which I'll explain more as we go along.
I really like that. We talk a lot about habits on this podcast because obviously when we look at health span and longevity, it all boils down to habits. The thing though is that there's so many of them. You need to sleep more, you need to move, you need to drink enough fluid, you need to breathe, you need to do all these things. So the question I have is, how do we make these changes when it can sometimes feel quite overwhelming? Certainly for me, my reason for doing this podcast is a little selfish as well. So I also got to a big number, 50, and did some epigenetic testing for myself. And I was a little disappointed with the results. I was hoping they would be a little better. So it started helping me to look at my habits as well. But when you do look into the research, there's so much. And I think very often people become overwhelmed. It's like, now I've got to do all these hundreds of different things in order to stay healthy. So how do you break it down? How do you make it a little bit more manageable?
Well, that's what I think is the beauty of this book, actually. As a younger woman in my 20s and 30s, I was a TV producer out in Los Angeles. And then I came back to my home state and got married and had 5 kids, and I homeschooled for about 20 years. Well, both of those required like really the ability to plan and be organized. And so I thought when I decided to write this book, I thought it's great to throw all this information out there on, natural health, on longevity, all the stats and all of that. But how are women going to execute on this? How can I give them a plan to make their lives changed, make things different, do better on these habits? So looking at the studies, I looked, of course, at the blue zones, which for your listeners, maybe some don't know, that's the 5 areas in the world where there's big conglomerations of centenarians, 100-year-olds living healthy lives. And they've looked at what do those areas have in common. Several people have looked at those. There's also Harvard studies on longevity with hundreds of thousands of women in them. There's also a book I think is really interesting called Radical Remission, and it's about cancer, and it's about longevity in that realm. And all of these are saying essentially the same things. So I broke those down into 3 pillars. The framework in the book, and this is how we simplify making these things happen. So the framework in the book is called the self-perpetuating circle of purpose. And the 3 pillars are body work, brain work, and world work. So all of those things in the study fit into those 3 pillars. Body work, our physical body, what are we doing? What habits are we engaging in for our physical body? Brain work, our mental, emotional, spiritual side. And then world work is our purpose and our relationships. So within each of those 3 areas, I've got the big 5. And these are like the big 5 things we need to do in terms of lifestyle habits that we should be really engaging in all of these. So the 5 in each of those categories. But this book leads to the 60-day dare. Okay, back to the 60 days. What I want you to do is pick one thing from each category. You could pick 2 or 3. You could pick more. You could pick, just one in one category. You're designing what your 60-day dare is going to look like. And so within body work, you've got eat a clean diet. It's different for everybody. So I'm not going to sit there and say you've got to eat like this, but I will say for women in the second half of life, protein is huge. Drink half your body weight in ounces. We've got to get hydration. They say, the largest percentage of ER visits are solved with hydration. We don't drink enough water. I mean, we're made of water. We're 75% water. Some organs are more. So that water is huge. Move. How are you moving your body? Are you walking? Are you strength training? The strength training, again, for our second half of life, we have got to have strong muscles. Sleep. Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of good sleep? I love my Oura ring so I can track it. Yeah, you've got one too. I love running into people that have one on. It's like, oh, you get it. You understand. And then breathing, deep breathing. Again, we don't know how to breathe. I used to be a yoga teacher. I guess I still do it sometimes, but it's where I really learned how that deep breathing. And we tend to breathe up here real shallow. That's a really big deal. There's an incredible book by James Nestor called Breath that I would recommend to anybody. It's so good. So you'll pick one of those and you're going to be very specific about what am I going to do for 60 days. There's a planner that goes with the book that can, be your planner, your daily planner for those 60 days. And then in brain work, we've got stuff about writing, journaling, about reading uplifting material, about clearing your home, decluttering your home, detoxing your home, getting the chemicals out, typically under the kitchen sink, the bathroom, and the laundry room. Those are the places to start. Meditation, prayer, affirmations, and then creating artistic endeavors that just are for the pure purpose of de-stressing. All of these go to the issue of stress. So, going out for a 30-minute walk goes to the issue of stress. Getting good sleep, they all go to that issue. Yeah. And then when we get into world work, one of the biggest things is our purpose. So I was when I hit 60, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm restless. That was the word that came coming up. And, what am I going to do for the next decade? What can I sink my teeth into? What can excite me when I get up in the morning? Because this is an incredible time for us. We've just spent all those decades serving, giving, all in whatever capacity we were doing. We realize our health is huge and it's important, and it takes some attention. It takes intentionality. And so, but purpose and figuring out that thing we want to do, we've got all this wisdom now. Wow. A lifetime of wisdom. That's pretty great. So it's a very exciting time. And I have a lot of friends who are in this same age group. And we talk about this because, I'm asking these questions. They're saying, I don't know what I want to do. I'm just not sure. And I love asking the questions of what were you thinking? What were your dreams when you were 17 or maybe 22? What were you thinking? Not that it has to be that, but maybe it's a variation of that, or, certainly something that's coming out of your years of your work, your natural abilities, your gifts. What do you really want? There's a section in the book for if you don't know. So there's 60 dream questions. So maybe one thing you would do in your 60-day dare is journal the answer to one question a day. If you're in that moment of, I don't know what I want to do. So these questions will, I think, lead you to that answer. There's also engaging. One of the biggest things lately, I've seen a lot of studies on longevity that our relationships and the quality of our relationships have the most to do with our longevity. We can get to this age and loneliness can be a real issue. Kids have gone off and who knows, maybe you're single or widowed or divorced, or friends have just, gone different ways. And so having relationships is crucial. And so there's, so that's an option. Maybe you're going to engage purposefully, put yourself out there, harder for maybe the introverts of the world, but putting yourself out there, making those phone calls, not text, getting with other people, going to coffee, just different things like that. There's also a spiritual piece there that's part of the longevity. All these people were part of some kind of spiritual community. That could be gathering for a church meeting on a Sunday, or a small group, or one-on-one, just to discuss those kind of aspects of life. Volunteering, that leads to people's purpose, but volunteer for something you want to do. I feel like a lot of what I do is try to teach people how to say no.
Yeah,
We
that's a
say
big thing.
yes to everything. We're saying no to maybe something that's really important, like exercising, or, having some white space in our life to think about, what do I want to do, right? We just need some of that downtime sometimes. And then ACT is the last one, which is if you do know what you're doing, spend an hour a day on it. So there's recommendations on what to do with them. But so you'll choose and you'll design your 60 days with those. And that's just the start, though. 60 is a good start, right? You don't want to just do your 60 days and then you're done. Hopefully maybe you take a little break or something, but then you do it again. And each time you're up leveling little by little. But when you look at those 3 categories and those 15 items, those are really the key things we should be doing in terms of our lifestyle. So it simplifies things. I think it gives people an ability to do something in bite-sized, baby step ways, which then it's not so overwhelming, right? Little by little.
Absolutely.
I think we sometimes set ourselves up for too much and then we don't do it.
Absolutely. And I also think that in itself creates a little spiraling up, because when you complete the 60 days and you have done whatever it is you chose to do, that little dopamine hit or boost kind of gives you a bit of a boost to do the next thing. So now the initial thing that you've done is maybe a habit now, so it'll stay.
Yes.
And now you add in something else. So it's all about making these tiny little changes. Yeah. I think, was it you that said your future is hidden in your daily routine?
Yes, that's one of my favorite lines. Your future is hidden in your daily routine. You know, I used to just be so opposite of thinking that way. I'm just like, I'm very spontaneous and, you know, I want to do what I want to do when I feel like it, right? But yeah, as time has gone on, I have learned that you have, what do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Do you want to be healthier than you are now? More fit, more, you know, do you want to have dealt with some trauma that maybe you haven't dealt with before? Um, you know, just what do you want your life to be like in 5 years or 1 year? You know, just kind of visualize that. And so what are you going to have to do? Well, it's going to be these little daily habits. And you have to plan it. You have to be intentional about, what does my year look like? What does my month look like? I love, you know, I have a planner that shows me my month and my week, and everything I put goes in my phone first because it's always with me. You know, I'm out. But then, you know, I mean, every morning I sit and look at, what does my month look like? I don't want to make it too crazy, you know, and too overwhelming. So it gives me a good sense of things. And same with the week and with the day, you know, so it's very important to just slow down, be intentional, take a few minutes to figure out, what do I want my life to look like?
Yeah, I really love that. I love the fact that you talk a lot about purpose as well. And I think the interesting thing for me when I started digging into health span longevity was just how often that theme comes up. The theme of having a purpose, which is, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so very, very important.
I mean, whenever I come across somebody that's, you know, at least like in their 90s, usually, or older. We've got a guy here that's 105. He's just amazing. But I always say, what was your secret? You know, what do you think? You know, and I have to say the majority of them, it's about purpose.
Purpose.
It's about what they're doing every day. It's one of them is the guy that mows our lawn. And I think he's in his early 90s. And you know, he's just like, I'm out here. I love me. I love talking to my customers, you know, and he just loves getting up and out every day, you know. So.
Which is also interesting because I think often when we think of purpose, people tend to think it has to be this really big
Yeah.
thing.
Yes.
Think of him, it's getting out, talking to his customers, or
Yes.
purpose is anything that gives you a reason to get up every day and get out
Yes,
there.
yes. It could be your grandchildren, you
Mm.
know, that you just want to have make a difference in their lives, like help them grow into good citizens, you know, or whatever it is. It could be a million things. I do put some ideas in the book about it, but you know, gosh, no limit to what it could be. It doesn't have to be something huge.
There are a lot of myths around longevity and health span. Do you have any in your book that you like to debunk?
I mean, I think it's I think the big myth is that, you know, well, this is like, so when I turned 60, it was on this little 7 month kind of searching mode where I was like, I think I have to just say yes to some things, and not that that's the thing, but maybe it'll lead to what do I want to do kind of more long term, like for this decade. And at one point I was hanging out with a friend of mine who we've been friends since we were 6 years old. And I had turned 60. She was about to turn 60. We went out with some of her friends. She lives in a different city. And she said, well, I hear 60 is the gateway to old age. And I just had this vehement response. I was just like, no, I do not accept that. And, but I think that's what most people think, you know, that it's too late. We're on the downhill slide. You know, it is what it is, you know, just sort of succumbing to these ideas of even disease that like happened in their parents or that kind of thing. You know, we know all about epigenetics, right? That it's these lifestyle factors that can change that, and lots of other things, but we won't go down that road. And so I just think it's never too late. One of my favorite people to follow on Instagram is Joan McDonald. Do you know her?
I do not.
Well, her handle on Instagram is Train with Joan.
I'm writing that down.
She is, I believe she's 78 now, and she was 70 when her health coach daughter said, Mom, you're sick and overweight. And she was very overweight. She was sick. She was on all kinds of medication. And her daughter was like, you know, I want to help you. and she had to move across country to be with her daughter. And her daughter just little by little started getting her healthy. And she's got, I think over 2 million followers. She's got a book. She's got an app. She is such an inspiration. She didn't start till she was 70.
I love that. I love stories like that.
Oh, it's incredible. She's probably my favorite inspiration right now. Although there's a lot you can find them. But so I do think that is key. It is never too late. I mean, I was 55 when I was not exercising consistently. I had all these kids, and just I would allow anything to take me away from exercise. And so I was not. I would go months, even years, without doing anything, physical to help my body. And so I turned 55 and had the mini freak out then before turning 60. And I was like, oh my gosh, is it too late? And I found a book that I read that, no, it's not too late. And so that was when I started exercising, and I had to take it to the extreme in my mind. I was like, okay, I don't care if my husband wants me to do something, if my kids want me to do something. These appointments to exercise are taking priority. And my life is going to revolve around these. And they were appointments. I went to a gym, and they were a class. So they were appointments. They were on my schedule. Nothing's going to take these away. So I started out 2 times a week. I then added a third a few months later, then a fourth, then a fifth. And since then, I've been doing 5 days a week of strength training and Pilates class, Pilates reformer. That's also some strength too. But I was just like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be around to be the mom. So I just had to take it to the extreme in my mind to get myself to do that. It's fine. They were fine. They knew I was going to do this, and that was important. That was a priority to me. It was all fine. But I think we think, oh my gosh, I can't, I've got to go to this event's happening, so I'll cancel that. Or, it has to be a priority. So I always try to say, don't stop saying I don't have time, because we all have 24 hours in a day. Start saying it's not a priority right now, instead of I don't have time. You do have time. It's just not a priority right now. I think that gets us in the right mindset.
And exercise is probably one of the biggest levers in terms of health span and longevity.
Yes. And just can walk, just walking. I think for like second half of life, I think the big things we can do are some strength training, lift some weights. We need our muscles to be strong. I watched my mother. She died in 2018, and the last 2 years she was in a wheelchair. She was always thin and fit, but she wasn't strength training. And so her muscles just literally deteriorated to where she could not walk. And I think about that a lot. So that strength training, but just also walking 30 minutes, 45 minutes. They say 10,000 steps, but at least 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 steps. And then, little by little, we do better.
Mm-hmm. I reference very often. I've got a listener on here who's in her 80s. And after a number of the episodes, she's come back and said, this is all very good, but it's too late for me. It's too late. So, I think it's really important bringing across the idea that even in your 80s, you can still start doing some strength training. You can still start doing little things.
Absolutely.
That will have an impact.
Absolutely. Because it is, just mobility. We want to have mobility, be able to get around. So yeah, the body just is an amazing thing. The fact that the body just heals, like we have to get out of the way for it to heal, right? If we're just eating a bunch of sugar and putting a bunch of chemicals in our body and smelling nasty house cleaner and, whatever else we're doing, then we're getting in the way of our body wanting to naturally heal. If we can get our environment right and the fuel that we're putting into it, then it wants to heal. So that's number one thing to remember.
So I'm going to ask you, what are some of the practices that you've put in place for yourself as a result of this process and this book that you've gone through and your research? Tell me a little bit about kind of what does your day look like? What are the kind of things that you're doing for yourself?
I mean, really all of these. Some I have done more in the past, like maybe journaling, maybe dealing with trauma in my life, therapy and things like that. But for the rest of them, I mean, I kind of try to do them all. Now, for instance, right now, when I get up in the morning, I have this red light therapy. It's a little rectangular light infrared light, and I sit in front of it. So it's on my face I think it goes for 12 minutes. Close my eyes. At that same time, I do some deep breathing. Do you follow Gary Brecka yeah. So, and then Wim Hof and then of course the book I mentioned earlier, but some of those deep breathing exercises, I think that's a great way to get your body just kind of started for the day. I put some essential oils on. I use some specifically for hormone balance. And so that's kind of how I start. And then I keep my mornings for myself. Like I'm doing this podcast with you, but I'm not going out into the world yet. I may be working on my work, like over at that chair or right here. I drink some coffee. I love coffee, but I do half calf, but it's also coffee that's got minerals in it. So it's a really good, healthy coffee. I put some collagen in it. You can't taste it when it's in the coffee. So the collagen is for skin and healthy skin, hair, nails, all that kind of stuff. I take, I have supplements that I take. So I put them, I don't have it with me, but I put my supplements in these little tiny baggies, and I'll put together 30 at a time. So I've got my morning and my nighttime. And another line that I love is environment triggers behavior. So we want to set up our environment to trigger the behavior that we want. And that's a big part of the blue zones is these people's lives how they live is nudging them to do these healthy things. In Japan, they're sitting on a cushion on the floor. So they have to get up and down, up and down, up and down. Their beds are low to the ground. So there's more up and down helping with our mobility. But those baggies, so I have one set in my nightstand. So at night, they're right there. I take them right before I go to bed. And then I have the other set over here in my office. So when I walk in, I see them, I grab them. And so I'm setting up my environment to help me do those things. Maybe if it's, you're trying to walk, you set those tennis shoes out and you see them. And that triggers you, oh, I got to put my tennis shoes on. I like to say, just lace up your shoes. Just lace up your shoes. Well, that's going to get you one step closer to just walking out the door and walking down the street, right? And then, I have some other supplements that are in the kitchen. So late morning, that are in my fridge. I drink a great wolfberry juice with some things in it. That wolfberry is incredible. That's from it's not part of the blue zones, but it's a place in Ningxia, China, where this one type of wolfberry from 17 types has been known. That's where their group of centenarians attribute their centenarianness to number one, this Ningxia wolfberry, they call it. They chew it, they cook with it, they drink it, they do all kinds of stuff kind of every day. Then green tea and ginseng were their number 2 and 3. It's super interesting. And then, I'm exercising also late morning, going to my class. And then I like to find, we all have a different, they call chronotype. You probably saw yours on your Oura Ring, right? So my best times for really deep focus to work on something like my business, my book, I've got a program that goes with it, is probably like 11 to 4, during the day. So I like to have that time to where I really am able to focus on things and, move the needle forward. I try to eat as much protein as I can. It's really hard for me. I could probably easily be a vegetarian. I mean, I don't want to be a vegetarian, but I could just from what I want to eat, right? So I really have to focus on getting as much protein as I can. And, I'm just thinking about like my refrigerator, back to the environment triggers behavior. I love to have like fruits and vegetables in glass bowls at eye level. So again, I'm triggering my behavior. When I open that refrigerator door, that's the first thing I see. Oh, those blueberries sure look good. So, and then, kids come home late in the afternoon, kind of like to be able to be there for them at that point. At night, typically I try to do something with a meat and a vegetable. My husband comes home and ideally we would go for a walk. That doesn't always happen. I'm about to start my own 60-day dare. It's very soon, and walking is going to be on there. I was really good for, we go in and out of being good at things, and for some reason we get out of the habit. And so I got to get that back on track. It just hasn't been consistent is how I'll say it. I'm great at going to my class 5 days a week, but the walking I've got to get better at. So, but ideally, after you eat, like 30 minutes later, go for a walk. That's a really good habit to get into. So anyway, bedtime routine. I mean, it's important to have those, I think, morning routine and bedtime routine. For me, my husband is asleep in 3 minutes. It's incredible. For me, it's this whole process. So, I take my supplements. I wear my amber glasses so I'm not getting the blue light. What else? I put some essential oils on at night that are conducive to sleep. And I've got a CBD roller that's kind of an essential oil roller. Just, various things like that kind of can help set the stage up, in the room, in the bedroom, there's little lights on things. So I've covered those with black. You want your room as dark as possible. So I guess that's kind of a day in the life, just an average day.
That's fantastic. I love it. So you've got some really good things in there. And like you say, first thing in the morning, last thing at night. I think if you've got those 2 bits of the day right,
yes,
a lot of what happens in between kind of sorts itself out. If you start the day off in the right way, and if you end it in the right way, the middle bit will always kind of work itself out.
I think you're right. If you've got those 2 areas down and consistent, I feel like one of the problems I'm solving with this book, I hope, is the problem of inconsistency. And isn't that, to me, that's one of the hardest problems. How are we consistent back to, your daily routine, your futures hidden in your daily routine?
So do you have any tips on that? Because that is a big one, and a lot of the time people will get started on something and then life happens.
Yeah, I do know. With this, when I turned 60, freaked out. It's like, what am I doing? One of the things I did during that 7 months before I had the revelation, I'm going to write a book. Oh my gosh, are you kidding? Can I write a book? But during those 7 months of sort of searching around, I did a thing called 75 Hard. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's over here in America, and maybe it's worldwide. I don't know. Probably is actually, but it was developed by a guy, big, muscular, tattoos. I mean, I had heard about it and listened to his 45-minute podcast on it, and I thought, oh, I'm not your target market. That's like too hard. I can't do that. It was very physical, but which kind of translates to mental too. But you had to exercise twice a day, 45 minutes each, one out in the elements,
wow,
whatever the weather was. You had to drink a gallon of water, which is a lot. You had to engage in some kind of clean diet. Like if it was just a general clean diet, it's like no dessert, no sugar, no alcohol. Or you could do a specific diet, and then you had to read a certain number of pages a day. It was 10. And it was those 5, and take a picture of yourself that you just kept to yourself. And so I thought, there's no way I can do that. Well, then I was in this group, this Facebook group, and this goes to a point I want to make about accountability. I was in this Facebook group that I had also found during that time about really living your life, just doing all these great things. And so this guy that started that wanted you to have a misogi each year. Well, a misogi is a life-changing event. That's a Japanese word for a life-changing event. He wanted you to do something each year that was memorable. It could be anything. It could be, I'm going to go hike up that mountain, or I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to lose a certain amount of weight, or I'm going to repair a relationship. It just could be anything, but something that you'd be like, okay, 2021, that's what I did. 2025, this is what I'm going to do. And so I was just in this Facebook group. All these people are talking about all these great things that they're doing. And I was just sort of sitting there reading that for 3 months. Well, then this girl says, hey, I'm going to start 75 Hard tomorrow. Does anyone want to do it with me? And I was like, I heard about that 4 months ago. I didn't think I could do it. So I listened to the thing again and I thought, maybe I can arrange my life to be able to do this somehow. I did it. And you could not, if you messed up one day, you had to start over. I mean, it was real intense. And so I thought, this is going to be my misogi, number one. This is going to be something I'm doing because I turned 60. So I was pretty motivated. And most importantly, I had been around these people talking like this for like 3 months. So there's another saying, we are the 5 people we hang out with, right? Who are they? Are they lifting us up? Are they pushing us down? Who has influence over us in our lives? Who do we hang out with? And I think that, when you are going to do something like the 60-day dare, I think you need to do it. Most people, there's a few people out there that they'll just go do it on their own and they're fine. But I think for most of us, we need accountability. So at least get somebody to do it with you, or a group of friends to do it together. I have a program that's going to be starting here soon. That's going to be an online thing where we have a weekly Zoom call, and it's an accountability. How's it going? What's going good? What's not going well? So I just think when we're doing something with other people, which also goes to that relationship question of, are we in relationships with other people that are lifting us up, right? That's huge. That's way we can be successful is, doing something with other people, especially women. We're meant to relate to each other. Think about cave women sitting around the fire and talking while the men are out killing the animals.
I think, and there is another element to it. It's not just accountability, but it's that social connection, which is, again, one of the pillars of longevity and health span, is having a strong social connection. And in this case, or in this context, it's maybe having people who have the same vision and the same, not necessarily the same, but a very similar vision of what they want to achieve. So, working, towards something together. And like you say, having that community where you can come in and go, I've done really well this week in this, but, actually I did not do very well in this area. Getting that support and that connection and community is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Huge, huge.
I'm going to ask you one more thing, because I think one of the things you're pretty big on as well is resilience. Can you say a little bit more about what that means and also why it's important for longevity and health span?
So I'm assuming you're talking about mental resilience, kind of back to the brain work. I think that what pops up in my mind right now is when I think we all have probably a moment like this, but when I was about 15, and I was on the swim team, and it was summer, and we had to swim twice a day, morning and night, in this big outdoor 50-meter pool. And gosh, it was hard. And I just remember, lap after lap thinking, if I can do this, I can do anything. And, I'm sure everybody has their moments, after being alive for however many years we've been alive, right? I went through that thing. If I can do that, or even looking at someone else, if she can do that, I can do that. Right? So, but we have to if we have trauma in our life, which we all do to one degree or another, and the trauma could have been something that looks like from the outside not a big deal to a lot of people versus maybe something horrific for other people, but it colored us and it made us go a certain direction. It doesn't matter, relative to something horrific. That's irrelevant, right? We remember those moments that someone said something to us. 30 years later, we still remember that thing, right? So it's have we gone through and have we dealt with all of those things that we need to deal with? Because I think that we can get to this age and there's some things maybe we didn't deal with and we still need to. I think that journaling, that writing can really do a lot for fixing that. Maybe it needs to be more into a therapeutic situation. It's with talk therapy or, gosh, there's so many therapies out there now. But, maybe it's just, I'm just going to sit here and journal. There's one thing called morning pages. It's been around for 30 years, right? Best thing to do is write when you wake up. Just get that journal, get that pen, and just write. Just let your hand go without stopping. Don't edit. You can throw it away. And just getting what's up here out onto paper. There's a real brain thing with the hand and the writing and all of that. So I just think, we can be tough. We can be tough. And what happens a lot is we say we're going to do something and then we don't do it. And so little by little by little, we start not trusting ourselves that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. So that's where the intentionality comes in. And, you've got to write something down. That's why, I have the planner that goes with this book. I think that's essential. We can't just wake up and just willy-nilly go about our day and just sort of react to what's happening to us. We have to decide what's it going to look like. And through that, I think we can become mentally tough. We want to be mentally tough. We want to be able to handle things. We want to be able to not be reactive, but to act as much as we can. And that kind of makes me think of the Mel Robbins' latest book called Let Them. I have not read it because I feel like I know exactly what it's going to say. It is on my list to read or listen to. I love listening. But, it's just sort of like, just let them.
That's my mom's favorite book, by the way. That's my mom's favorite book. She feels it's kind of turned her life around. Wow. But I haven't read it. I haven't read it either. But what she's told me as well is that it's that kind of let it go. Interesting. I talk to so many women who say, I turned 50 or I turned 60, and then I said, well, fuck it. Sorry, that's the word. Yeah,
I'm with you.
Let them. Yeah. And that is, I think it's such an important part of that emotional and mental resilience.
Well, yes, because the only problem that's going to result if we don't let them is we have a problem, right? And we're going to be all anxious and upset. And it's just like, no, life's too short. Mm-hmm. Let them do what they're going to do. Maybe mostly that comes to our adult children. They're going through life. It's like we really have to change. We have to, how we interact with them. We really have to kind of wait till they want our advice. Hopefully they do. Maybe they don't, but yeah.
So it's really about sort of, I'm not trying to control other people's behaviors and what they're doing. And I think as parents that's quite difficult, isn't it? It is tough. You've got 5 kids. I only have 1, but I know how tough it is to let them.
Yes, it really is. And I'm learning a lot about that because you want to have a good relationship with them. You want them to want to come home and hang out and have fun and just enjoy life. Because truly they're the people, like the most important people in my life. So I want to have a great time with them. I want to go on a trip with them and have, just fun and all of that. So, and they all think different things. It's quite interesting.
So tell me, Alison, how can people connect with you and also find more about your 60-day DARE program?
Yes. Well, I have a website. It's my full name, AlisonMcCuneDavis.com. So you can find everything there, links to the book, links to the program to get notified about the program. It hasn't started yet, but it's about to. I'm not sure when this will come out, but so you can check there for anything. I'm also probably on social media. I'm mostly on Instagram, but I'm also on Facebook. So either of those places, again, my full name. So yeah, send me a message.
Well, listen, I really appreciate your time. It's been really fun having you on. And just really great to talk about, I think, hitting these milestone birthdays, which do get people to just stop for a moment and think a little bit about where they are and where they're heading. But I think these are important times in life where we can just take stock and start thinking about what it is that you want to create in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so this has been really, really interesting just to give people, I think, more of a structured framework maybe that they can work through if they are at that point and, starting to think about how do I make change that lasts and how do I move from where I am now to, doing all these lots and lots of different things that I think I should be doing and, trying to make it not as overwhelming.
Yes, I agree. That's the goal. We want to make it doable.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you sharing some of this with our listeners as well.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.